¿Recesión o no recesión? ¿Qué es lo que va a pasar en los mercados financieros en 2023? ¿Vamos a tener un año calcado al 2022 o en cambio 2023 va a ser un año mucho mejor? ¿Qué es lo que va a pasar también con la renta fija? Ha habido muchos que han dicho que va a ser este año el año de la renta fija, de los bonos. Bueno, se lo vamos a preguntar a Lazard Fund Managers, que hoy aquí en Madrid han presentado perspectivas económicas. Estamos con Matthieu Grouès, que es Managing Director y CEO de Lazard, frères, gestion. Matthieu, thank you so much for being here in Negocios Televisión.
Nice to be here, thanks.
First of all, I'm going to ask you about a recession. Do you see a recession in 2023, or you don't see this coming in this year? Because there's much debate about whether we will have recession in this year.
Yeah, there is a debate, will we have a recession or not, and we answer clearly that we will have a recession. Having said that, we are not completely sure it will be this year, because the economy, particularly the US economy, is resisting very, very well. And so we think that there is a likelihood to have a recession this year, but there is also a likelihood that the recession won't happen before the very beginning of next year. Mm-hmm. But at some point in the next 18 months, we think we will have a recession. Mm-hmm.
Markets, by the way, expect the Federal Reserve to cut rates in the second half of 2023, but the Federal Reserve says that they won't be doing this, they won't be cutting rates until 2024. Who do you think is right, the markets or the Fed, whether the Fed is going to cut rates this year or the next?
We think the market is wrong. Market is wrong, definitely. We are not sure the Fed is completely right, because the Fed is saying, okay, I'm going to increase rate the next few months, and after that, I will pause. And so I won't do anything between Q2, Q3, Q4. And we are not sure of that because, as I said, we find that the economy is very strong. And so maybe later the Fed will realize that if they really want to slow down the economy, they will need to start re-hiking interest rates. And so maybe the second part of this year, we will see new increases. We were allowed to see lowering rates, but they could increase rates again in the second part of this year if the economy is too strong for them.
Mm-hmm. So you think the markets are completely wrong in thinking they are going to cut rates, but you believe that the Federal Reserve is not going to do that, but in fact is going to hike rates again. By the way, many fear this inflationary period we're having this year, 2022 and 2023, is not ending here right now, and that we might have a second round of inflation. Do you believe this can happen? This can be the case, and that it can happen in 2023?
We don't really see a second round of inflation. If you mean a reacceleration of inflation, we don't expect that. What we think is that it's true that probably because wages are going to increase significantly, it will put upward pressure on inflation, and it won't mean a rebound, but it will mean that it will be more difficult for central banks to slow down inflation, and that we think markets are expecting that inflation will be back to 2% at the end of this year. We think they are very, very optimistic, and we think it will take longer than that, in fact.
Mm-hmm. That's, in fact, what the Federal Reserve says, that we aren't going to see inflation back to 2%. That is the objective of the Federal Reserve until 2024 or even 2025. What are your expectations in Lazard Fund Managers for the stock market in 2023? Do you believe this will be a positive year, 2023, or we will have somehow a copy of what happened in 2022? And in that case, what is your view on different sectors, for example, energy sector?
So we think this year will be complicated. We don't see a positive year. It could be something quite similar to last year, because we think that market expect that we will avoid a recession, we will have just a soft landing. We don't believe a soft landing will be enough to slow down inflation. And if we have a recession this year or at the very beginning of next year, it's necessarily very negative for equity markets. So we think that this year will be negative. Regarding sectors, we think that value stocks should do better than growth stocks this year again. But inside value stocks, there are very cyclical stocks, and we think that if we have a recession, you still need to avoid this kind of value stock, and you need to focus on other sectors. The sectors we favor for this year are banks, which would benefit from the increase in interest rates, and which are in a very strong position even if we have a recession. They are very, very strong now. And we also like in fact, pharmaceuticals, because they have no impact from the cycle. If there is a recession, there is absolutely no impact on the turnover of a pharmaceutical. So that the two sectors we favor. To answer your question about the energy sector, it's very hard to answer this question because we have no idea where energy prices could finish this year. It will depend on many things about the Russian war, about the kind of winter we will have next year, if it's very cold or very warm. It's about many technical factors like the ability of European countries to buy a lot of liquefied natural gas on the global market. So it's too difficult to make a forecast.
Many analysts, many fund managers say that this year, 2023, is going to be the year of fixed income. What do you think? What is your opinion on fixed income? Do you believe we've already seen the peak in yields in corporate debt or sovereign debt?
We are not sure we have seen the peaks. Probably we haven't seen the peak yet, but we are sure that the absolute level is much more attractive now than it was 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We have had investment grade corporate rates at 0.5% for 10 years. Now we are at 4%. So even though we think that the peak is ahead of us, we think it makes sense to start reinvesting gradually. And definitely, we prefer much more the fixed income market this year than the equity market. Because on the fixed income market, you have the carry. The carry is significant when you have 4% per year. Even if at the end of this year you have a peak in interest rates or a decline in prices, if during 1 year you receive the equivalent of 4%, it helps you to absorb the decline you could have for a few months later.
You say the peak is ahead of us. That's because you think the Federal Reserve is going to hike rates in the second half of this year.
Yeah, we think that both are going to the peaks will be higher first for government rates, because we think that central banks are going to be more hawkish than what is expected now by markets, and also on credit spreads, because we think that we will have a recession, and during a recession definitely you see higher spreads than what we have now. Spreads are much higher than they were 2 years ago, but during recession they are even higher than they are now.
Do you favor government sovereign debt than corporate debt for this year?
No. For this year, what we prefer, it's a good quality credit, so investment grade, at least now. Later, probably we will reinvest in a high yield, and we prefer short-term debts. We think that there isn't a significant risk to see some default this year, because the economy is very strong, issuers are very strong. So the risk that you have is to see an increase in rates, and so a decline in the value of your bond. And the risk is higher if the bond is a long bond, of course, because the duration is higher. And so what we think is that it makes sense to invest in short maturity credit now, and if rates go up a bit and spreads go up a bit later this year, to start investing in more aggressive fixed income bonds like high yield bonds, for example.
Matthieu Grouès, Managing Director and CIO in Lazard, frères, gestion. Thank you so much for your time, for being here in Negocios Televisión in this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Bueno, y nosotros nos quedamos con algunos mensajes, como por ejemplo, bueno, pues que vamos a tener una recesión, pero quizá no este año, quizá más bien en la primera mitad de 2024. Lo que está claro es que desde Lazard nos dicen que podría ser en algún momento en los próximos 18 meses y que el mercado no tiene razón, que está ahora mismo equivocado y que la Reserva Federal, lejos de bajar los tipos de interés en la segunda mitad de este año, lo que va a hacer es subirlos de nuevo. Va a pausar esas subidas de tipos en torno a mediados de año, pero que después, cuando ya vaya acabando 2023, vamos a volver a tener una ronda de subidas de tipos. Nos quedamos con estos mensajes: recesión e inflación, desde luego, quizá no tanto segunda ronda de inflación, pero todavía subidas de tipos para 2023.
Muchas gracias, Marta. Nos quedamos, por tanto, con las